There's nothing they'd like better than to see Apollo Creed give a local Philadelphia boy a shot at the greatest title in the world on this country's biggest birthday.
Carl Weathers has died.
There has to be parallels between an actor and the character.
Carl Weathers, the man who once stepped onto the screen with Apollo Creed's immortal smile. The star who helped build the legendary Rocky franchise, the action icon, who appeared alongside Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator, and later an Emmy nominee for The Mandalorian. A friendly face, a warm voice, a career that seemed flawless. But few ever imagined that glow was built on stories no one would believe: violence in training, failure after failure, public humiliation, and even real blood spilled just to survive. The sensitive black boy from a poor neighborhood in New Orleans, mocked for dreaming, too big, dismissed from the NFL as an afterthought, would become the very man Hollywood learned to fear. People thought the anecdotes were made up. Weathers mocking Stallone right in the Rocky audition, demanding the violence be pushed so far that doctors had to intervene, even telling a director, "You're not good enough to shoot me." They laughed until they saw it with their own eyes. So what turned a man once dismissed into a legend, Hollywood would never dare underestimate? Life begins with fear. Carl Weathers' life began with fear. Before he became a screen icon, before he transformed into the proud Apollo Creed, before Hollywood saw him as an indestructible warrior, his life started with a fear so real that a child could believe a single misstep might cost him his life. Carl Weathers was born on January 14, 1948 in New Orleans, Louisiana, a place where simply being a black boy meant you had to grow up faster than everyone else. Post-World War II, America was still suffocating under racial injustice, and the Deep South at that time resembled a stage where discrimination was performed openly every single day. His father was a manual laborer, the family lived in constant hardship, and the children in that neighborhood learned how to fight before they learned how to read. But Carl was an exception. He remembered clearly that he had been a too sensitive child, completely out of place among the street-hardened boys in the neighborhood. These were not exaggerations, they were facts. The timid young Carl was often bullied and forced to hide who he really was. Out there, they could kill you literally. "I bore the curse of being too sensitive," Weathers said bitterly. A child like that growing up in such an environment was not allowed to show weakness. And that suffocating world made Carl feel out of place in the very city where he was born. Yet the sensitivity that seemed like a curse opened a different door for him. While other boys fought to prove themselves, Carl turned to the stage. From very early on, he was mesmerized by theater. After school, after running from the neighborhood bullies, Carl would stand in front of a mirror practicing lines, becoming characters. He dreamed of stage lights, a luxury dream for a black child in the 1950s. Of course, no one believed that a poor, skinny, overly sensitive kid dared to dream of becoming an actor. But fate always knows when to slip in. In 8th grade, something unbelievable happened. Carl received a sports scholarship to attend St. Augustine, a prestigious private school for African American students, known for strict discipline, strong athletics, and a future no longer confined by the borders of his old neighborhood. That leap felt like someone had pulled Carl out of a predestined swamp. At St. Augustine, Carl transformed. From a child who only knew how to run away, he became a rare, multi-talented athlete. Football, boxing, judo, wrestling, gymnastics. Carl played everything, and he played well. His versatility was not luck, it was survival instinct. Sports protected him, gave him a voice in a world that demanded strength, and more importantly, gave him a place he had never had before. But even as his body grew stronger and his gaze sharper, Carl never forgot he was an artist at heart. Football season lasted only 1 year. The school plays were where Carl felt truly alive. He kept acting, kept feeding the dream of breaking free from prejudice. Carl understood sports could lift him out of poverty, but art could lift him out of fate. Carl Weathers' childhood had no loud joy, no sheltering presence, no miracles. It had only two things: the cruelty of racial discrimination and the loneliness of a child who did not fit in. Yet those very things forged in him an extraordinary resolve, a blend of physical strength and artistic sensitivity, of iron discipline and a soft heart. No one believed a poor, timid, sensitive black boy could become a Hollywood icon. No one believed those impossible childhood stories were real. But that was the opening chapter of the Carl Weathers legend. A legend that only when witnessed firsthand would people understand why he never bowed to anything. The first detonation of a destiny that refused to bow. At 18, Carl Weathers stepped into a new world. No more dark, damp corners of New Orleans. No more shouts of racial hostility. Sports became his one-way ticket out of the fate that once seemed predetermined. In 1966, Carl left his poor hometown and flew alone to California to accept a football scholarship at Long Beach City College. From there, his life shot forward, like an arrow drawn taut throughout his childhood, now finally ready to be released. Carl's talent ignited so quickly that Long Beach could no longer contain him. After 2 years, he transferred to San Diego State University SDSU, the place that shaped the earliest steps of the Weathers legend. At SDSU, Carl played defensive end, a position demanding both physical strength and sharp tactical intelligence. He not only met expectations, but surpassed them. In the 1969 season, the SDSU Aztecs went undefeated at 11-0, won the Pasadena Bowl, and ranked 18th in the nation. In that brilliant lineup, Carl was one of the key weapons, a warrior unafraid of collisions, unafraid of blood. But amid that triumph, Weathers lived a parallel life few people knew about. While his teammates trained extra hours or partied, Carl quietly went to the SDSU theater. In 1970, he played Pallades in the Greek tragedy Orestes, right on campus, a demanding layered role utterly opposite the image of a powerful defensive lineman. People could see clearly the two sides of Carl the artist and the warrior, both growing, both pulling at each other, both generating the unique energy that Hollywood would later find impossible to ignore. Yet the football path was far from smooth. Injuries clung to Carl like a shadow from his earliest college days. As a freshman, he sprained his ankle so badly, he had to miss the entire season. At SDSU, his knee suffered a severe injury that forced him onto the bench again and again, watching his teammates dominate the field. For someone who had long been familiar with standing outside society's margins, being pushed aside once more cut deeply into his pride. But Carl did not give up. He called his former coach a phone call that seemed desperate, but opened a door no one expected. The Oakland Raiders, one of the NFL's strongest teams at the time, agreed to give him a chance. In 1970, Carl Weathers signed a professional contract, officially entering the NFL, a dream larger than anything the poor boy from New Orleans had ever dared to imagine. However, the NFL was no fairy tale. Carl played only 7 games for the Raiders in his rookie year and barely saw the field in 1971. At the start of his second season, legendary coach John Madden delivered a cold decision, cutting Carl from the team. What Madden said to him shattered the 23-year-old player. "You're too sensitive for football." Carl felt as if he had been slapped across the face. Sensitive, the word he had spent his whole life trying to bury. Sensitive, what had made young Carl a target for bullies' threats and endless fear. Sensitive, what life had used again and again to humiliate him. "I couldn't swallow that," Carl recalled. The wound was painful, but painfully true. It made him realize that the NFL was not where he belonged, and it placed a weight on his shoulders, a spark small but fierce waiting for an explosion. After leaving the Raiders, Carl played for the BC Lions in Canada for 2 seasons, 1971-1973. No stadium lights, no NFL prestige, no clear future. And then in 1974, Carl quietly hung up his cleats. Some might call that failure. But for Carl Weathers, that failure was a time bomb, a detonation triggered by the knife of sensitivity Madden had thrust into him. A detonation that would not occur on a football field, but in a place Hollywood never realized was about to receive a seismic shock. And that was the moment Carl's life veered onto a path where he no longer had to wear the mask of a warrior, but would become a true warrior, in every sense before the camera. From NFL player to screen actor. In 1974, at age 26, the age when most NFL players were hitting their prime, Carl Weathers did what almost no one else dared. He walked away. Not because of injury, not because he lacked motivation, but because he carried a dream even more explosive than the collisions on the field, becoming a true actor. Something few believed a player cut from the NFL for being too sensitive could ever achieve. But Carl knew better than anyone he had been born an artist. "I was an actor before I was an athlete," he recalled. "I'd been doing theater since grade school. Even when I got the football scholarship, I still majored in drama. That wasn't a pretty line for interviews. Carl had just completed his bachelor's degree in drama at San Francisco State University. Earned through nights of studying after practice and stage performances, he hid from teammates to avoid being teased. Now carrying the iron discipline of an athlete, the emotional resilience forged in a childhood of violence and discrimination, and the heart of an artist that had never stopped burning, Carl stepped into Hollywood, the place he believed was his real destiny. But Hollywood does not open doors with a smile. It tested him in its characteristic way: unemployment, tiny roles, meager pay, and skeptical looks reserved for any NFL player who thinks he can act. Throughout 1974-1975, Carl lived the familiar cycle of every new actor carrying a bag, to auditions being rejected, going home to rehearse, then doing it all again the next day. He accepted any role he could get, from henchmen in B-action films to blink-and-you-miss-it cops in TV shows. Bucktown and Friday. Foster 1975, both part of the blaxploitation wave, were among the first projects that let him stand next to more seasoned black actors. On television, he showed up briefly in Good Times Kung Fu Canon, all so small that viewers could miss him with a single blink. But Carl Weathers was used to being underestimated. His childhood taught him endurance, the NFL taught him resilience, and art taught him persistence. He didn't show up on set just to get the scene done. Even for roles lasting minutes, he treated each as a full training session, studying lines on his own, learning how to command his eyes, practicing posture in front of the camera, observing every crew member to understand how filmmaking worked. These years brought him no fame, but they built the invisible arsenal Carl would later use to change his life. By the end of 1975, Carl's acting resume fit neatly onto a few lines. But what he possessed, and what Hollywood had not yet noticed, was a rare fusion: the physique of a professional athlete, a foundation in martial arts, boxing, judo, and wrestling from his St. Augustine days, and the acting instincts honed since childhood. Carl waited for a chance, and it came in the form of a modest, low-budget project from an unknown production team, a boxing film called Rocky. The studio was searching for someone to play Apollo Creed, an undefeated champion, confident, dazzling with the charisma of Muhammad Ali. The role demanded real athletic stature, endurance for fight choreography, and above all, the aura of a showman warrior. Hearing the description, Carl knew this wasn't just a role, it was fate calling his name. When he walked into the audition room, Carl didn't just bring a resume and a headshot. He carried a lifetime of being underestimated, a lifetime of hiding sensitivity, a lifetime of fighting to survive. Carl once said, "I didn't come there to ask for the role. I came to take back what the world had taken from me." And indeed, that Rocky audition, a seemingly small event that would alter film history, would transform Carl Weathers from a failed NFL player into Apollo Creed, a cultural icon. He did not yet know that the audition would become so famous it would turn into Hollywood legend, or that the very sensitivity the NFL rejected would become the key that allowed him to embody one of the greatest characters of 1970s cinema. Carl Weathers had arrived at the door of destiny, and this time, Hollywood was about to open it wide. Apollo Creed, the role. No one expected to become legendary. No one knew that the audition that day would become one of the most famous, life-changing moments in Hollywood history. A small room, a few wrinkled pages of dialogue, a former NFL player clinging to an acting dream, and a single sentence that could have destroyed his future. Instead, it became the moment that launched Carl Weathers into legend. That day, he read a few lines opposite a muscular man, whom Carl assumed was just a stand-in, someone reading lines to keep the rhythm. Carl finished his scene, felt he hadn't burned enough, and blurted out in frustration, "I could do much better if you got me a real actor to work with." The room went silent. An assistant's eyes widened. The director froze. And Carl Weathers had no idea that the man he had just insulted was Sylvester Stallone, the screenwriter and star of Rocky, the film that would later gross $225 million USD, win 3 Oscars, and become a global cultural phenomenon. It should have been the end. But Stallone laughed a dangerously perceptive laugh because he didn't see disrespect. He saw Apollo Creed alive and standing right in front of him. That arrogance, that overflowing confidence was exactly what the film crew had been searching for months. And in a single impulsive moment, Carl delivered the very soul of the character. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He stood there proud like a true champion. Carl got the role the same day. In 1976, Rocky hit theaters, a low-budget independent film that became a cinematic earthquake, a box office triumph, multiple Oscars, and the launch of Stallone's career into the stratosphere. But the man audiences couldn't take their eyes off was Carl Weathers' Apollo Creed, a Hollywood version of Muhammad Ali, flashy, intelligent, cocky, but undeniably magnetic. Many critics even argued that Apollo was the true heart of Rocky. The character represented black pride during America's post-civil rights era, a symbol only Carl could embody with such elegance and charisma. Some magazines even speculated that if Hollywood hadn't been so cautious about white audience sentiment at the time, Apollo Creed might have become the central figure of the entire franchise. Carl Weathers continued playing Apollo in 4 films: Rocky 1976, Rocky II 1979, Rocky III 1982, and Rocky IV 1985. From rival to partner to close friend of Rocky. And finally a tragic icon when Apollo fell to Ivan Drago, a death that left 1985 audiences in stunned silence. Stallone later said Carl deserved an Oscar nomination for that scene, not because of the fall, but because of how he let Apollo die with honor, his eyes still burning with pride. When Carl Weathers passed away in 2024, millions called him the champion of every generation. A role born from a mistake became the greatest legacy of his life. And that was only the beginning. What came afterward was even crazier: the giant who would not back down. The glory of Rocky turned Carl Weathers into an A-list name, but it also opened a turbulent fault line behind the camera, a place where ego strength and star power crashed into each other like sledgehammers. And Carl, with perfectionism, fierce pride, and a temper simmering beneath his polished exterior, was never the kind of man who stayed quiet when he felt disrespected. The biggest shockwave erupted in 1985 when the Rocky IV team began filming the now iconic boxing sequences. Stallone, always chasing brutal realism, demanded punches that truly landed and impacts that felt like a real death match. That philosophy had already put Stallone in the hospital. After Lundgren struck him so hard, his heart rhythm became irregular. So it's no surprise the set crackled with tension. During Apollo Creed's fight with Ivan Drago, Dolph Lundgren, a 6'5", 240-pound European karate champion, went too deep into the role. He grabbed Carl and slammed him into the corner of the ring, the impact so real it momentarily stunned him. Carl rose, eyes blazing, furious enough to storm off the set immediately. He delivered a line that froze the entire crew. Either he apologizes, or I'm done. Stallone halted production for 4 days. Meetings, negotiations, calming egos. Lundgren later admitted, "There was some tension. I may have gone a little hard." Only after peace was restored did Carl return. And the world later witnessed one of the most devastating, powerful scenes in the Rocky franchise, the death of Apollo Creed, filmed with a chilling realism. Part of it came from acting. Part of it came from the real anger still flickering in Carl's eyes. But Rocky IV wasn't the only clash of power. In 2006, Stallone wanted to reuse Apollo Creed footage for Rocky Balboa. Mr. T agreed. Lundgren agreed. Hollywood assumed Carl would also say yes, until he made a demand that left Stallone speechless. "I'll let you use Apollo, if you give me a new role." The problem: Apollo had been dead since 1985. Stallone refused, of course. Carl then barred the production from using any images of Apollo Creed. The result: Rocky Balboa was forced to use an actor to play a fake Apollo Creed. And the bond between two former cinematic titans cracked for real. It wasn't until 2015, when Stallone made Creed the story of Apollo's son, that Carl relented and allowed the old footage to be used. Industry insiders said Carl Weathers wasn't just protecting a character, he was protecting his own dignity. He refused to allow anyone, including Stallone, to treat Apollo Creed as mere decoration. And then came Predator, 1987. Arnold Schwarzenegger recalled the cast was full of athletes, fighters, and bodybuilders. Everyone woke up at 4 a.m. to lift weights except Carl, who always said, "I don't need to work out. I'm naturally like this." The truth: Carl secretly woke up even earlier training alone, so no one would know he was pushing himself. A quiet form of competition. Very Carl Weathers, never boastful. but never willing to be outdone by any muscle-bound star in Hollywood. In hindsight, people realized these clashes weren't bursts of random anger. They were the marks of a deeply serious artist, a gridiron warrior who carried steel discipline into cinema and never lost the fighter part of himself. Carl Weathers didn't just play power, he lived it. And sometimes real power collides for real, a rare shadow in the life of a clean star. In a Hollywood overflowing with scandal where controversies spread faster than blockbuster releases, Carl Weathers was almost a miraculous exception. No drugs, no bar fights, no explosive affairs, no career-ending statements. In more than 50 years of working in entertainment, Carl Weathers' name was never tied to any major scandal. Something almost unbelievable for a globally recognized action star. Some say it was the discipline of an NFL athlete still etched into him. Others believe it was his introverted, reserved personality. Someone uninterested in the spotlight, living by the rule work, more talk, less. Whatever the reason, his clean record made the few controversies in his life stand out. Not because they were severe, but because they were so rare that people couldn't ignore them. The first and biggest erupted in 2006 when Stallone began developing Rocky Balboa. At the time, the press ran wild, with claims that Carl Weathers demanded a new role before allowing his old footage to be used, painting him as difficult and egotistical after the success of Rocky. The truth was far more nuanced. Carl simply wanted Apollo Creed, one of the most iconic characters in American cinema, to be treated with proper respect. When Stallone refused to offer him a new role, Carl immediately withdrew permission to use Apollo's footage. No threats, no bargaining. Just a firm decision that forced the film crew to find someone to play a fake Apollo Creed in the recreated flashback fight. Hollywood debated for weeks. Some supported him, some criticized him. But both sides agreed on one thing. Carl Weathers never compromised when it came to his art and his legacy. It wasn't until 2015, when Stallone made Creed, that tensions finally eased. Carl allowed Apollo's footage to be used again, a gracious gesture that closed a decade-long rift. His second major controversy didn't come from film at all, but from social media, very much modern-day drama. In 2021, while working on The Mandalorian, Carl unexpectedly found himself in a storm after defending co-star Gina Carano just as she was being heavily criticized for political comments. Carl tweeted encouragement, saying she was on the right path with the hashtags #DieGoGina, #DieBePeace. That alone set Twitter on fire. Some Star Wars fans were furious, claiming Carl was indirectly supporting extreme political views. Others defended him, saying he was simply offering kindness to a colleague not taking part in any culture war. Even so, the online uproar dragged his name into headlines for days. But true to form, Carl handled it the way he handled everything. No arguing, no explanations, no public fights. He stayed quiet, focused on the work, and moved on. And time proved him right. Carl returned for the next season of The Mandalorian, beloved by fans, facing zero consequences from the drama. Interestingly, Carl Weathers' controversies never revealed a dark side, they highlighted his strength. A man who disliked noise but stood his ground when he believed he was right. An artist who avoided gossip but never bowed to Hollywood pressure. And perhaps it was this calm in the storm that allowed him to maintain a respected position for decades, something hundreds of other action stars could only dream of. 3 marriages and the children he cherished. When he stepped in front of the camera, Carl Weathers was Apollo Creed, proud, explosive, and majestic, like a god of strength. But off-screen, he was a completely different man, warm, gentle, understanding, and so open-hearted that everyone who ever met him said the same thing: Carl is one of the kindest people you'll ever know. His private life included 3 marriages, marked by quiet joys and the occasional sorrow of a man who always placed family far above fame. In 1973, Carl married his first wife, Mary Ann Castle. They had 2 sons, children. Carl always called the reason I keep trying to become a better version of myself. The marriage lasted 10 years before ending in 1983, but what never dissolved was his role as a devoted father. Friends said that whether he was filming in Mexico, Canada, or Europe, Carl always called home every night to talk to his children. Adam Sandler, a close friend and admirer, spoke through tears when remembering him. A wonderful man. Loved his boys more than anything. We all loved him. It was not a polite compliment. It was the truth that defined who Carl was. After his first marriage, Carl wed model Rona Unsell from 1984 to 2006. Their partnership, lasting more than 2 decades, produced no children, but remained private, quiet, and free from scandal. His third marriage to Jennifer Peterson, 2007-2009, also ended gently. No lawsuits, no media battles, none of the chaos often seen in Hollywood breakups. By 2014, Carl found a final peaceful home with his partner, Christine Klugian. Those close to him said she was the one who brought rare tranquility into the turbulent life of an action star. The two lived simply, enjoyed walks, and preferred small family gatherings. No lavish mansions, no wild parties, no need to show off. Just the calm of a man enjoying the final act of life with the things that mattered most. Beyond family, Carl's character was what made him beloved across Hollywood. Director Robert Rodriguez, who worked with him on The Mandalorian, said a line that many actors would envy. When Carl walked into a room, he brought positive energy with him. He made everything better just by being there. Humble, generous, sincere qualities rare among stars were simply his nature. Though he had been an NFL athlete, an action icon, a Rocky legend, Carl never behaved as if he stood above anyone. He thanked every crew member. He let others take the spotlight in interviews. He encouraged young actors the way an older brother lifts up those behind him. And above all, Carl never abandoned discipline. In his 70s, he still woke up at 5 a.m., ran, lifted light weights, ate on schedule, no excessive drinking, no late-night parties. While many action stars of his generation fell into alcohol stimulants or reckless living, Carl chose balance, a healthy body, a clear mind. Friends said the only thing he was truly obsessed with was golf. Golf and football, the two joys that brought back the image of the 20-year-old Carl, strong and playful. And above everything else, Carl Weathers lived by one rule: loyalty to his friends. If he cared about you, he would protect you to the end. Just as he stood by Gina Carano during the media backlash, not to take a political stance, but because he refused to abandon someone he considered a friend. Behind Apollo Creed's armor, behind Dylan's muscles, in Predator, behind Grief Karga's commanding presence in The Mandalorian, Carl Weathers was a simple, kind man who loved his family, loved his friends, and lived by the principle, do the right thing, whether anyone is watching or not. A real-life hero long before he ever played one on screen. The final chapter of a general. The image of Carl Weathers greeting fans at Calgary Comic Expo 2015, still broad-shouldered, still radiant with that unmistakable smile, still carrying an aura that commanded an entire hall, was the clearest proof of his ageless magnetism. Near 70, he still walked onto a stage like an undefeated warrior arm, raised to salute the fans who had followed him for decades. Few could have imagined that less than 10 years later, Hollywood would bid farewell to one of its immortal icons. On February 1, 2024, Carl Weathers passed away in his sleep at his Los Angeles home, aged 76. The family said he went peacefully in his sleep. Those simple words stunned millions. Because Carl wasn't just an actor, he was the childhood of entire generations,
and look
a
bad.
cinematic memory,
So
a symbol of strength and kindness. Someone like that never truly feels like they can vanish. Just hours after the news spread, Hollywood lit up with tributes. Sylvester Stallone, in a video that broke hearts around the world, stood before a painting of Rocky and Apollo, speaking with a trembling voice. Carl Weathers was a miracle. He was wonderful in every way.
Thank you, man.
I cannot express the pain I feel. Then Stallone looked upward, as if speaking to his fallen friend. Apollo, keep throwing those punches. Arnold Schwarzenegger wrote, "We couldn't have made Predator without Carl. A true legend, powerful on screen, magnificent in life." Michael B. Jordan, the man continuing the Creed legacy, posted a photo of Apollo and called Carl a torch. Pedro Pascal wrote, "An icon, a teacher." Adam Sandler said through tears, "We all loved him." Hollywood rose to its feet as if a general had fallen. But a legend is not remembered only through tears. Carl Weathers left behind a cinematic legacy so rich it can't be summarized in a handful of lines. First came Apollo Creed, the role that launched him to the summit, a charismatic, brilliant powerhouse boxing champion modeled after the real-life Muhammad Ali. Apollo wasn't just Rocky's rival, he was the soul of the story, ambition, pride, swagger, and the true American spirit. The character lived so long in the hearts of audiences that the Creed films 2015-2023 continued to revolve around the legacy he left, proving Apollo had transcended cinema to become a cultural icon. Then came Predator 1987. A single exploding muscle handshake with Arnold was enough to send Dylan into meme history. Together, Carl and Arnold created one of the most iconic action duos of the 1980s. In the sports comedy Happy Gilmore 1996, he made audiences laugh with his one-handed golf instructor Chubbs, demonstrating a range few action stars possessed. And in his 70s, Carl once again rewrote his own script when he became Grief Karga in The Mandalorian. Initially a guest role, it became so captivating that producers expanded it, then invited Carl to direct episodes. At age 73, Carl Weathers received the first Emmy nomination of his career, a late but deeply deserved recognition. From boxing rings to jungles to distant galaxies, Carl Weathers' footsteps stretched across universes the path of a man who never stopped moving. Yet his greatest legacy wasn't in the roles he played, it was in who he was. Carl Weathers embodied a truth. Beginnings do not define endings. A sensitive black boy growing up amid poverty and racial injustice in the Deep South. A young man rejected by the NFL for being too sensitive. An unknown actor taking tiny roles just to get by. And yet, with iron will and the artistic fire he carried since childhood, he rewrote his destiny. Step by step, role by role, audition by audition, punch by punch, failure by failure. Carl approached everything with the discipline of an athlete and the heart of an artist. He also taught us that sometimes courage means changing direction. Had Carl clung to the NFL, the world would never have known Apollo Creed. And because he walked away from football in 1974, he opened the door to a half-century of cinematic triumphs. The president of SDSU said after Carl's passing, Carl Weathers embodied both the champion spirit and the artist's soul. He will forever be an inspiration. In August 2024, just 6 months after he passed, Hollywood awarded him a star on the Walk of Fame, a late honor, but one carrying eternal meaning. Among hundreds of stars, some rushed past, some forgotten by time. Carl Weathers' star holds a special weight. It does not honor just an actor, but the fighting spirit and resilience of millions who once saw themselves in Apollo Creed. That star stands as proof. The stories once doubted have become legend. Today, Carl Weathers is no longer here, but he lives on in every frame of film, every tribute, every punch thrown by Apollo, every line spoken by Grief Karga, and in the eyes of young people who look to him as a symbol of resilience. You will find him in gyms where young black men lift weights because Apollo is my idol. You will find him in acting classes where students study Rocky to learn how to speak half a sentence through their eyes. You will find him in the way Hollywood tells the stories of people no one believed in, people who wrote their own legends. Carl Weathers lived exactly as Apollo once urged, keep throwing those punches. And his legacy, like the greatest punch he ever delivered, will echo forever in the hearts of audiences today and for generations to come.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore. Stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.